I'm delighted to have the opportunity today to talk to Barry Gross. Barry is making a real difference in this year's election. And Barry, what motivates you to be so involved? And tell us a little bit about your background.
All right. I'm a lifelong Democrat, grew up in Detroit, lived in Michigan most of my life. I retired in 2015, and as one of the things I wanted to do afterwards, I spent a lot of time working on the 2016 election. I did a lot of voter registration, training others to do voter registration, staffing the Democratic Party office in Ypsilanti, and also making some phone calls to increase voter turnout. This was the second time I had worked on an election. First time was 1972 when George McGovern was running for president. And after those two experiences, it occurred to me, I could not do anything but increase my level of participation, because I don't know if one person can make a difference in the election, but if I didn't do everything I could do in 2020 and it didn't go the way I wanted, I just wouldn't be able to accept that for myself.
Barry, you've been amazingly resourceful and creative in the way you've been using the WAVE system. Could you describe for us a little bit about what you've been doing and how you've been doing it?
Sure. One of the things I really liked about WAVE from the beginning was it allowed me to craft an email to people that I was trying to recruit to become absentee ballot voters. And I could make it personal. I could include things that I thought were important. And I like using email in that way because I find it helpful but not intrusive. And so I started out going through all the contacts in my telephone, figuring these are people I know pretty well. I would verify first that they were people who were likely to vote Democratic, and then I would send them a tailored email, and that went pretty smoothly. And as time went by, it occurred to me, I'm not asking them to donate money. I'm not trying to engage them in a political discussion about what's the best future for the United States, what's the best party to vote for. I'm just giving them the opportunity to have an easier voting experience. So I went back through contacts and tried to figure out people I knew more remotely. And it occurred to me I could do people that I worked with. So, because I'm retired, I have no authority over anybody. So I went through the Department of Radiology at the University of Michigan, contacted people I knew pretty well. Subsequently, I went back and did people I knew not quite as well. And that is exactly how I've gradually expanded my sphere of influence. From there, I decided I was going to get in touch with my neighbors because after all, we have something in common. We live in the same part of the city. And again, I'm not trying to persuade them to do anything except to make it easier on themselves. Once I was interested in doing the neighbors, I ran into a little bit of a problem, which is I don't have email addresses for most of them, whereas people I worked with and all my good friends and relatives, I have email addresses. So the first thing is I figured out I was willing to write letters and enclose the necessary information to the people in my neighborhood and put a stamp on it. I would gladly donate $50 or $100 or $200 to influence the outcome of the election in the direction I wanted it to go. So to put together a group of letters which ultimately expanded, I'd say about a 1 square mile area near where I live, I ended up maybe sending 125 or 150 letters out. So what does that cost me? $75? That's a donation I would gladly make. More recently, Chuck, you may or may not know this, I decided, well, I don't just have to do my neighbors. I can pick streets in the area near where we live and go down the whole length of the street and see if there are people who might be interested in voting our way and might want to do absentee voting. So I started out with non-neighbors who had some University of Michigan Medical School connection. And then I thought, wait a second, I can look up most of these people. Maybe they have a U of M connection, but it's not medical. I could still be in touch with someone with a non-medical school connection. And the last thing I want to say about how I've been using WAVE is I'm happy to keep going back to people I've already solicited before if I know that they're not yet on the permanent absentee ballot list, because there are new developments constantly occurring. I initially did this the old-fashioned way, printing out for them or allowing them to print out an absentee ballot application that allows them to check off the permanent absentee ballot list. But at a certain point in time, most of the city of Ann Arbor went online with an application to be on the permanent absentee voting list. I figured I could go back to people I had tried before. Maybe the convenience of online registration would make that better. I sent out a lot of new letters and applications recently because of the pandemic. And I've had a tremendous response to that group of letters, because I think people are scared, and I think they know, having watched what happened in Wisconsin in the primaries, that we don't want to send people out to start getting COVID-19. So that's been a big help. And even more recently, the Washtenaw County clerk now has made it possible for anybody in the county to register online for the permanent absentee voting list with one link. You send it to the Washtenaw County clerk and they move it on to whomever would really need to get that. So I think, Chuck, you can attest to the fact that I've had an explosion of activity the last month or two in response to these various things that have happened. And yet I'm still finding new people to get in touch with all the time.
We are amazed and appreciative of you have reached out to about 8 times as many people as anybody else, which is a testimony to your creativity and your commitment.
Thank you.
Barry, I think it would be helpful if you have one of the letters that you would include to folks so we can understand what it is that you were asking them to do. I don't mean to spring this on you, but do you have one available?
Not a problem. I have it. So I have my return address on the letter, dear blank, and then I would fill in the names as I went along from house to house. I am a nearby neighbor at 3642 Middleton Drive and a retired University of Michigan physician. Given the reality of life in the COVID-19 era, I am planning to vote by absentee ballot in all upcoming elections. This is easier than ever before because Michigan now allows absentee voting without excuses needed. There is even a permanent absentee voting list, which gives you the choice of, but does not require, absentee voting in every subsequent election. I have included a request form to add you to the permanent absentee voting list, and I'll describe how I get that in a moment. All you have to do is sign it and mail it to the Ann Arbor City Clerk at the address listed, which is 301 East Huron Street. Alternatively, if you prefer to sign up for the permanent absentee voting list online, you can do so at, and for my neighborhood letters, I included the Ann Arbor City link that allows registration for the permanent absentee voter list. I am now expanding it to use the Washtenaw County one because now I'm including people I know in Dexter or in Saline. So one-stop shopping is best. And I concluded the letter with all best and please stay healthy. Sincerely yours, and I signed my name. Now, what I did to send them forms if they wanted to send in a form was in the WAVE application, when you're looking at a given person's statistics and where they're voting, there's a link that says print permanent absentee voting request. And if you click on that, it shows where they would have to send a note to their city or township clerk. And so I used that and made a separate page for each member of the household who I was trying to sign up, so that each of them would simply have to sign the form and return it. It's got a date on it. It's got their return address correctly listed. So I might send an envelope with the letter and one request to get on the permanent absentee list. But if there are 4 people in the household who all could be good voters and are not signed up, I'd send the letter and 4 requests, each personalized for the specific voter.
What kind of response have you gotten? I know you didn't
Oh my
ask
God.
in that letter, but
it's been a tremendous response. Lots of people have gotten back in touch with me, both from emails and from the letters that I've sent. In the neighborhood, I am a mild local celebrity, because people say, oh, you're the guy who sent out all those letters. But I do have some specific replies I'd like to read to you, if that's all right.
Please.
They illustrate a few different aspects of what I've been doing. So the first one is an email I sent to a former coworker and friend of mine. This is the 3rd time I was in touch with him. I got in touch with him initially. I got in touch with him a 2nd time when Ann Arbor developed their online list. And the 3rd time I sent it because of COVID-19. And within 20 minutes of emailing him, he wrote back the following: I just filled in the online forms for all 3 of us. That's himself, his wife, and his daughter. Obviously, I am convinced more than ever now of the need to do this. What was allowed to happen in Wisconsin was unconscionable. So that was one quick reply. Another reply I got was from a person I worked with, but not closely, not a close friend, but somebody at U of M. And he wrote back, thanks very much for this email. I hope that your Get Out the Vote project is going well. Let me know if I can help. I think that's important. I think there are people who are not only willing to vote the way we are, but are willing to move our efforts forward. And so I've been back in touch with him, and in the next few weeks, I hope we'll have a conversation where he can become a recruiter or whatever else he wants to do to help us. Third one that I got a kick out of was from a friend in the neighborhood here, not somebody with whom I was unfamiliar. I have their email address. So I sent something to her for the 2nd or 3rd time and said, by the way, your son who lives in a different area of Ann Arbor can also use this, and here's how he would do it if you can forward it for me. She wrote back and said, well, my son, unfortunately, and his wife are moving to Utah in the next couple of months. But then a couple of days later, I got this note back from her. You got me motivated. I found the form for Bloomfield Township for my other son and daughter-in-law to submit where they live. Thanks again. So again, you never know what that's going to spark when you send something like this. 4th one that I want to share out of 5 is from one of the neighbors a block away from me, somebody I've never met. I don't know them at all. I sent out that big batch in the 2 streets near me and got back this note. Thank you so much for the absentee voting information. You made it so easy. We had just been talking about it too. We appreciate your thoughtfulness. And then they gave me a PS. If you or anyone you know need bleach wipes, we have several canisters to share. That wasn't my favorite part of the note, but it wasn't bad. Finally, the last one I wanted to share is when I kept expanding the list of people I was willing to do on other streets in town, I ultimately got to the point, as I say, where I let go of any restrictions. If I could get an email address for somebody on Arlington or Gettys or Devonshire, I was going to send them an email. And one of the couples that I sent to were both English professors, nobody I've ever had any contact with. I sent them an email and got back this note. Dear Barry, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You are an inspiration. I think that's a little bit of an overestimate, but I will say that it's so heartening to send something to someone you don't know and get that kind of warm response. And it just reinforces for me, it's not like we're doing anything unpleasant to people. We are just trying to help them to do things they want to do themselves.
That's fantastic. And I think that last comment you made is, I think, a very telling one. We're not asking you to go canvassing door to door, which is not going to even be possible, I don't think, in this election, or at least not for a
Agreed.
long time. They're not going to open the door, and you're not going to want to go.
Yeah.
So you're doing people a favor by doing this. Obviously, this has been a big commitment for you. About how many people do you think you've reached out to?
Well, the contact list on WAVE says 900 something. I don't know how accurate that is. Some of this is recontacts, but it seems to me it's probably been around 1,000, I think. And I'm not done.
Clearly, I see every day you're not done. And about how much time do you think you may have spent reaching out 1,000?
Well, that's hard to estimate. One thing I will say currently, I know, Chuck, you know this, my in-town daughter has a baby boy who turns 6 weeks tomorrow. And so we've been doing a lot of preschool care for the 5 and 3-year-old siblings. But it's interesting, I still can fit in an hour in the evening, and we're often off on the weekends. And so I spend some time doing this on the weekends. It's not something you have to have a block of 10 hours to do. You can do it half hour here and an hour there. The trick is just to keep thinking of new ways to expand. And the current one that I'm about to start working on is that my daughter, whom I just mentioned, lives about a mile away from us. I communicated with her about her neighbors, and I'm going to do her street with letters or emails if I can find emails. But some of the people I know, particularly mentioning her name, will help. They're not far from me, so they're still neighbors anyway. So I'm planning to do a number of blocks in their area with either emails or letters. And who knows what streets I'm going to be doing next.
Barry, I want to echo what one of your respondents mentioned. You truly are an inspiration. And when I hear and read about people being bored while they're sheltering in place, I think you're a wonderful example as to how we can all use this time to great advantage. And with a few more Barry Grosses, I am absolutely sure we're going to win in November. So thank you today. There are any concluding remarks you want to add? Anything else we should know?
I do have to reflect the following, which is before attending a wedding of a friend's daughter, I was not clear about what opportunities there would be for me to do anything. And then I happened to sit next to this fellow, Chuck Newman, at the wedding. And when he started talking about WAVE, I thought, oh my God, that's something I have to do. We talked about how people can help. And I'm working on a couple of other projects as well. One of them is that there is a local organization called Turn Up, Turnout, which was organized by Edie Goldenberg, a political science professor at the University of Michigan. It's a really fabulous organization, and they are doing a bang-up job of increasing student voting turnout, both at University of Michigan and at a number of other institutions in the area. And Washtenaw Community College is also doing something independently that's very much like this. So I think these are people who deserve our support. My feeling about this, you have to do that kind of organizing in a totally nonpartisan way. But I think the more young voters we can encourage to vote without knowing what their voting predilections are, the better off the Democrats are going to do. Another thing is through WAVE, You've made an amazing number of contacts throughout the state, and I think people have opportunities to help with some of these affiliated organizations. I've been working with a really inspirational group called Femmes for Dems, who you got in touch with, and now I'm sort of a liaison for, and they are doing great work in Metro Detroit, particularly in Oakland County, and there are opportunities all over the state. So for anybody who is looking for ways to get involved, there are organizations here through WAVE and outside of WAVE that I think can use our help and can do good work on our behalf.
Thank you, Barry, for everything you've done and will be doing. If you are interested in learning more about how Barry reached out to his neighbors, go to www.wave-michigan.com. There will be videos on the site which will tell you how to register and get started. There are going to be training sessions, some of which will be devoted exclusively to what I'm calling right now the Barry Gross approach. May be renamed in the future. So with that, thank you very much. And we're going to have a wonderful celebration in November.